Well, hello there and welcome back to another video. Today I want to talk to you about the box office results from the last weekend. However, I have to come clean and say that I haven't been able to properly prepare for this show as much as usual because I'm currently in the middle of a film shoot that I'm producing, which is all over my Insta stories if you're interested and want to find out more about it. But there is a lot to talk about. If you haven't seen one of my videos like this before, essentially we go through the top 10 movies at the UK box office from the last weekend. We see how much money they made, because when doing that it reveals a lot about the movies and a lot about the decisions that the studios behind the movies that the kind of things they're going to make going forward. And if you've got no idea what I'm talking about and you're feeling a bit lost, just bear with me and I'll try and explain everything as best as I can. Right, so here is the list for the top 10 films at the UK box office for the weekend 13th to the 15th of April 2018, and by far the most interesting thing on it is who is at number one, and that is Rampage. Rampage is Dwayne Johnson's newest movie. It's we talked about it a little bit on a previous show. It's a hybrid between his kind of action style with films like San Andreas and his kind of family brand with films like Jumanji, both of which have done really well, and he's kind of combined it in this film. And first thing I've got to say is the fact that this is debuted at number one is very impressive. That's very impressive for this film, which I think if you've seen the trailers, certainly to me it felt very much like a B-roll, a B-standard film. Like the kind of film that you would see for the first time on Netflix and be like, meh, I've got nothing else to do, why not just watch this trashy film? Now, full disclosure, I haven't had a chance to see it yet. I'll be seeing it probably at the very start of next week. But I'd love to know if you've been to see Rampage, what you thought of it in the comments down below. For the past few weeks in the UK, Peter Rabbit has hogged the top spot, and I really expected A Quiet Place because it seemed to be doing so well and defying expectations all over the world so much last week. I thought it was going to jump up to number one. Again, if you missed previous shows, A Quiet Place is a horror film that is a little bit different. It has like a little twist, and I read the screenplay, and I think it is slowly going to accumulate some big numbers over the next few weeks. But saying that, I did expect it to jump up to number one this week, but as you can see, it's at number 3. However, the beady-eyed of you may have noticed that its hold was 29%. That's basically the percentage difference of how much money it made this weekend compared to last weekend. And 30% is really good, especially for something that's up there in the millions. As a guide, an incredible, like amazing blockbuster, record-breaking film in its first week could make something around £15 million, whereas your average blockbuster will make something around £10 million, like just touching double figures. But the £4 million opening for Rampage, I'd say, is still really good. And so apparently, Dwayne Johnson is a big box office pull. I think we talked a little bit in another show about how it's quite rare nowadays to have that style of Hollywood sort of movie actor who you would go and see a film just because they're in it. But Peter Rabbit, in its 5th week, having a hold of 36% and still being at number 2, amazes me. I still haven't seen that film. I thought the trailers were pretty bad. I thought it was going to be a sort of average throwaway family movie, so I didn't get to see it. But by the time I film this next week, for this coming weekend, I'm going to have seen Peter Rabbit, because I need to report back and tell you whether this is actually a good film, because it's reporting some amazing numbers. In the UK so far it's grossed 40 million. That's not too shabby, and it's doing quite well abroad as well. It's so much so that there might even be a sequel. It'd be interesting to know, especially if you have seen it, whether you went to see the film because it's Peter Rabbit, the brand and the well-known kind of character, because you liked one of the other actors in it. What's his name? The guy who plays General Hux in the newest Star Wars, and he was one of the Weasley brothers in Harry Potter. Anyway, him. Or did you go to see it because James Corden is in it? I'd be really interested to hear if anyone went to see it just because they like James Corden. What else is interesting about this top 10? Ready Player One has had a 50% drop in his 3rd week, which is quite bad. Generally, a blockbuster film like that, you'd expect to hang around in the top. You'd expect to do what Peter Rabbit's done, basically, and stay up in that sort of top 3, like raking in a few million every single week. But it's week 3 for Ready Player One, and it's already dropped down to, it's still over £1 million in the UK. I certainly wouldn't say that's good, which surprises me because, as again we've talked about before, I quite enjoyed it as a film. I think what it is is that it just doesn't feel current enough. It feels too dated, and like you're not actually seeing something new. And perhaps the people who would have gone and seen Ready Player One this weekend decided to see the new movie Rampage instead. I think that's the only movie on that list that is of a comparable genre. Next on the list we've got another debut, and that's Truth or Dare. Now I mentioned last week that I thought it was either... to be fair, watching the video back I realised I covered all eventualities, so it wasn't really a prediction. But I said it was either going to do a monumental flop like Ghost Stories, which incidentally I've noticed has completely fallen out of the top 10 this week, so you won't even be able to see it on your screen, but it is down at number 13 and it has had a 55% drop in its second week. That was the horror movie starring Martin Freeman, and I noticed he was on the Graham Norton Show, which is probably the biggest sort of entertainment sort of talk show in the UK, I'd say, and he was I've heard it's quite big in America if anyone American is watching. But apparently no one thought it was very good because it only made £265,000 at the box office this weekend. So that's after the Graham Norton Show appearance, which is appalling. No one wants to go and see this film, which is a bit of a shame for Martin Freeman because he tried. Bless him. Bless his cotton socks. But anyway, back to Truth or Dare. Because it had the backing of Universal, also I think it had a very clear target audience in mind, that kind of sort of teen young person demographic who supposedly love horror movies, and this is from the same studio, which is called Blumhouse, I think. It's the people that make, I think, the Conjuring movies and the Annabelle movie last year. So that kind of group of movies, which is like a well-established horror brand. So basically what I'm saying is they know what they're doing. However, nothing amazing, nothing awful, just like meh. Then at number 6 we got The Greatest Showman, still hanging on in the top 10, still at number 6, which is... that's insane. That's like every single week I'm just, until it drops out of the top 10, I'm going to be like, that's amazing. It's still there. It's still there. Critics hated it. Audiences love it. In the UK, they've been doing sing-along screenings, which I assume also counts to that number. So that might also explain why it's done particularly so well. Because they've gone, oh, this is doing well. Let's quickly re-release a slightly different version to make people go back and watch it again. Saying that, when it first came out, I did watch it twice. Talking about things that I've seen twice, Love, Simon is number 7. And it's got a hold of 47%, which... isn't good, isn't bad. Again, it's kind of mediocre. I'm a little bit disappointed with that personally. I imagine it might drop down to 10 next week and maybe fall out. Depends on the quality. Well, actually, we'll talk about it next week. Then at 8 we've got Isle of Dogs in its third week, 40% drop. That's pretty good, pretty standard. Nothing amazing, nothing bad. Number 9 we've got Black Panther. Similar to The Greatest Showman, as in... I can't believe I've just compared Black Panther to Greatest Showman, but they are similar in terms of their results. And then at number 10 we got Duck Duck Goose, which I didn't talk about last week because I didn't find it interesting enough and didn't find anything interesting to talk about it, and that's exactly the same this week, but it's had an honorary mention for being in the top 10 2 weeks in a row. So what movies are going to come out this week to shake up for the box office for the next weekend? The answer is nothing. Really? In the UK, there's only really 2 wide releases. The first one's from Studio Canal, and that's the Guernsey Literary and Potato Peel Pie Society, which is just the most British B film to exist. It's historical, and I think it's got something to do with the war. I think it's probably going to have a debut in the UK of like around the £1 million mark, might push up to £2 million. Nothing tremendously exciting though. The only other wide release is The Leisure Seeker from Universal, and then Warner Brothers are doing a limited release of the movie Wilding. But quiet release weeks like this are very rare at the cinemas nowadays, particularly because people like to go along and watch a movie, and they've got unlimited cars and whatnot. But if you've been living under a rock and you're wondering why this week is so quiet for new releases, it's because in 1 week's time Avengers Infinity War is going to come out, and it's going to be interesting to see whether it breaks records, because I would say potentially all the box office records of sort of biggest opening week, biggest box office of all time, biggest this, biggest that, biggest US opening, biggest international opening, biggest opening in China, all of these records are kind of on the table. There's never quite been a movie like this before, so it'll be interesting to see how it does. But in terms of the movies on this list, as I mentioned last week, Avengers Infinity War may have cleared the release calendar and taken up a lot of screens at the cinemas. Not everyone going to the cinema is going to want to watch Avengers, or maybe people are going to watch Avengers and then want to go to the cinema again and see a different film. And so this is a great opportunity for another film to play the long game and slowly get in lots and lots of money and build up a decent number for itself. And although I'm pretty sure I know which films on this list are going to do that and sit there in the top 5 playing the long game, to be honest, we're going to have to wait until at least next week to find out. And that is where I'm going to leave the show for today. If you want to watch more of me, I'll leave another video around here. And all that's left for me to say is thank you so much for watching, and I will see you soon.